Hey Leggari Nation! This is part 2 of 2 videos that show you how you can make this beautiful USA flag using Leggari's Flag Stencil. We start with a hollow core door and end with this. If you love this project, this is something you can do too. Head over to our website and get your stencil and epoxy today.
All right, so when you're laying your stencil out, you want to just make sure it's even on the board. This one's overhanging just a tad bit. So what I did was the sides are lining up perfect. The length, the width is just a tad bit too long, so I want to make sure it's even on the board. So I just went a 1/4 inch overhang on here, 1/4 inch overhang on there, and then everything should be squared up. So we can take the blue tape, we're going to go right in the middle. We're going to tape this so it doesn't move on us. So the next step, now that we have it taped off, this thing's not going to move. We're going to fold back one side. And it's good to have a helper. I'm going to have Landon jump in here and help me. But we're going to pull this backing paper off. And we're going to cut the backing paper off, squeegee this half down, and then do the same on the other half, and this should be lined up. All right, so all we got to do is just run a squeegee. We want to have a little slack on the flag here, and I'm just going back and forth. So you want it to kind of drape. And then I just push it down. Now we're not worried about getting bubbles or anything in it because we're just pulling this off anyways. All right, so now we're gonna do the same thing on this other half. We don't need the tape because stencil is stuck down on this side. Stencil is down. Now we want to just kind of rub it all in good. And then we can pull the transfer paper. You want to kind of go slow on these stars, that way you don't rip one of those star pieces off. All right, there's the stencil, and then obviously all the cutouts is where we're gonna ghost the spray paint, the stars, and then when we pull this off, the spray paint will obviously be everywhere that's cut out here. So I'm gonna go get the spray paint, and then we'll ghost this thing and pull that stencil off. All right, guys, before we ghost this, I'm gonna tape these sides off, right? If we just ghosted it now, we're gonna get some of that spray paint color on the edges. Which is okay if you're trying to cover them up, because maybe your edges didn't turn out good, or maybe you got a bunch of runs or whatever. You can tape off your edges after doing this, and spray your edges the same color that you ghosted out here, and it would be like a trim piece. Look really cool. So your edges would be the same color trimmed out as the color that you ghosted it. Looks really cool, but we're gonna tape this off to cover the edges. That way when I'm ghosting this, we're not getting any of that color on our edges. All right, so we went with black. I think this is gonna look really cool, and that's what Landon wanted. So we're gonna do a little black on here. I'm gonna ghost it. Now you guys can do these a lot of different ways. You can do them solid, where you spray paint this a solid color. I'm gonna do the ghosting where we can kind of still see through it a little, but when we pull the stencil off, you'll be able to tell that there's a flag in there. And then you can also do your stars a different color. You can do a thin blue line. There's just so many different options when you guys are spraying this with the spray paint. So like I said, I'm just gonna ghost it, get a little bit on there, so it's very subtle and we can still kind of see through in some of these spots. So always make sure you're shaking your cans up good, and then start with less. You can always add more. So it doesn't look like there's a lot there, but when we pull it, you'll really be able to tell. And again, I wanted to just kind of ghost this so it's real subtle. You can see through it still. So we'll let this dry, get a fan on it. And if you guys are doing this in a house or in your garage, probably should be wearing a mask, maybe try to get some airflow in there. But yeah, that's how you ghost it. And then if you guys are spraying it solid, you don't want to spray it thick. You're better off doing a few thinner coats. That way you don't get any bleed marks or have the spray paint lay out not flat. So if you're trying to completely cover these lines, just do a couple coats. That way you're not just flooding it with spray paint. All right, so we put a fan on it, let it sit for about 10 minutes. Just ghosting it, it's gonna dry really quick. If you guys are trying to completely cover these lines with a solid coat of spray paint, you're probably gonna want to let it sit and dry a little bit longer. So we're able to pull this right now. Get these edges pulled. And a little tip for you guys is you can start on a corner, like say, get a spot pulled, and then maybe you want to do more, right? If you wanted to do more, you can just fold this back down and spray more. But I like the amount we have there. They're gonna show up really good still, and you can see through it a little bit. All right, so now we can use our other 3 quarts out of the 1.5 gallon kit to do our flood coat. And then if you guys are wanting to do like a urethane on here, either a matte or gloss, you guys can also add that as well. But we're just gonna flood coat it with the gloss, let that thing sit, and show you how it turns out after that. All right, so we're gonna mix the remaining 3 quarts out of the 1.5 gallon kit the same way we did when we did the metallic epoxy coat. And then we're gonna use a squeegee and a foam roller to apply it, and I'll kind of go over that, why we use those instead of like a nap roller, because we don't want to get any hairs, any fibers in the finished product. Okay guys, so we're gonna be using a squeegee and then a foam roller, not a nap roller, so just a foam roller. And I'm also gonna de-shed the foam roller as well, because sometimes there is stuff that gets on it. As you can see, we got some little fibers that came off. We don't want that in this finished coat. And then we're just gonna dump a bead down the middle, and then I'm gonna squeegee it out so I don't have to roll it as much. And the resin's really white because I mixed it like a madman, induced a lot of air, which isn't a big deal with Leggari products resin. All right, now I'm just gonna spread this with the squeegee, back and forth. Jump over here before that starts flowing over. So the less you have to use a roller or a paintbrush, the less chance of getting any fibers or hairs in your final coat. So I always like to use a squeegee, get the majority spread out. All right guys, so I got the top pretty well spread out. Notice I'm not like running it over the edges on purpose. Some spots are kind of gonna drip, but I'm gonna make sure we get a good thick coat everywhere. And if you guys are confident in squeegeeing it out, you don't have to roll it. Like I could leave this. I know I got a good thick coat everywhere. It's gonna level out, become glass smooth. If you're not confident, you can take that foam roller and roll over it. So we'll just go nice and easy. I'm not applying any pressure, just kind of letting it glide over the surface. Get the top done, and then we'll run this along our edge. All right guys, once you've got the top done, rolled your edges, right? We wanna make sure there's no mist spot on our edge, and that's gonna let the resin flow over evenly and get a nice coat on our edges. Last thing we're gonna do is mist it with denatured alcohol, and that's gonna help all the air release. A lot of these white lines are just air in the resin from me mixing it like crazy, but that's all gonna disappear without having to use a torch on it. All right, so we'll let that sit and evaporate. Come back and give it a check. Make sure edges look good, right? We don't have mist spots, because it's always good to come back, not assume everything's gonna flow over nice and evenly. And then if we have anything inside of it that we might have to pick out, we are in a big warehouse, so we might get some debris and dust that falls in this, so we'll try to pick that out before it gets too set up.